All right, everybody, I want to welcome you to another episode of Fresh Takes, where we share fresh information, new information, exciting information on the world of speaking. So whether you want to be a public speaker or you want to become a professional speaker, just learn how to communicate better. That's why we put this all together. And today, I think I'm going to use the word fabulous because I've been using amazing a lot, but I've got the fabulous Rachael Mann here. She is the author of Martians in the Classroom, but she's also an entrepreneur. She is a professional speaker. She's an educator. I don't know how she wears all these hats. She is a dog lover, so I guess we can call you a dog mom. But she does so many great things. So ladies and gentlemen, today I've got Miss Rachael Mann. And Rachael, I'm just going to let you, I know I talked about you a little bit, but tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right, great. Thank you so much for having me on here, Frank. And since you mentioned the dog lover piece, just to warn everyone that my dogs are here and sometimes they get a little rowdy. So so if you hear a little background noise, that's why. But just a little bit about what I do. I am a former educator. I taught for about 14 years and then moved on to work at the Arizona Department of Ed for a bit. Decided to start my own company with, I do a lot of writing. I do projects for different groups. I'm about to start a podcast, which Frank, we need to talk a little bit more about that because I would love to have you on this new podcast that's coming out. And then I also I write. I have a book that's out, 2 that are coming out in December. And it really enjoyed being able to share ideas both through spoken word and through writing.
Yeah, so see, like I'm telling everybody right now, you do wear a lot of hats, but the interesting piece about you is, and I can share this with everybody, is obviously I met you because you actually booked me as a speaker. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the show today is you've got a unique perspective that many people don't have. You have hired and contracted speakers. You have been a professional speaker, but then you've also been out there in the audiences as an educator, to watch and see what's going on. So you've seen this from like every angle. So today I would love just to touch on the fact of, you kind of like worked your way up the ladder to become this professional speaker.
Well, and well, first of all, I do have to point out, Frank, because I did hire you. I just noticed this pen on my table this morning. I'm like, wait, that is so, I guess, serendipity to see that sitting on my counter. But yes, so public speaking isn't something that I was very intentional about. I did workshops for teacher groups. I hired people to come to conferences that I was planning, such as Frank. Frank even trained the high school students that I worked with in both leadership and public speaking and did a fantastic job. And I remember asking one of my friends who works for Google if he could do a keynote. And it was something we didn't have a budget for. I needed someone to speak for free. He wasn't available. And I said, do you know someone else who would be willing to do it just pro bono? And he said, yeah, you. And it threw me off. I'm like, I'm not a keynote speaker. I do workshops, but I'm not a keynote speaker. And it kind of planted that idea in my head. And I started looking up how to give a keynote and found out there's really not one formula or one right way, but it really just kind of planted that idea that, hey, I do have a message to share, and what a great platform to get that message out there. And he actually came back a couple months later and asked me to do an event. And then I had other people who would ask me from that point moving forward. But it's interesting when that idea is out there, suddenly things start coming to you, things start happening. So it really, again, it wasn't something intentional, but then I realized just how important it is to also have female speakers. When you look at the majority of conferences, we see what people call manels, all men panels. We see audiences filled with women educators and men speakers. And yes, we need both, but we don't. Part of the problem as a conference planner, and I know this because I try to make sure that we have diversity, and I'm on a few boards where we're booking speakers, and we try to make sure there's diversity. But sometimes it's hard to find female speakers. So I think that it's important for females to empower each other as well.
Yeah, I'm like, and it sounds crazy to hear this because obviously, majority of the world is female. People can go look up the stats. But isn't it amazing that this speaking industry is like you see very little, female speakers in this whole area? I'm like, how does that make you feel?
It's for one, it makes me feel empowered to be able to represent women. And also I'm always looking for opportunities to connect with potential female speakers and help them, give them advice, kind of coach them along, because we need to provide role models for younger women that feel empowered to use their voice And that's not there unless we see it. And the same thing with having diversity in color, just representation so that every voice is at the table. Being a female speaker, I would say the biggest con that I would run into is that sometimes I'll have someone come to me and ask me to speak at their event, and they'll say that they need a female speaker. So there's always that sense too of, wow, this is great that we're at a point where people recognize the need for diversity. But at the same time, I want to know that it's not just because they need a female on the stage, that it's truly that this is a message that they want to hear.
Yeah, that they really enjoy the message, because I know for me, and people listen to this, where I've been approached to go and speak, or I've approached people to go and speak, and they go, well, you know what, Frank, we love your message, but we've had 5 male speakers in a row. So, we're looking for a female speaker who speaks on, these subject matters. And they'll ask me, do I know somebody? And obviously, I will go out and refer people within my network. But for the ladies and the men, because we have to get a full understanding here, what are, because I always will ask this question for people, usually at the end, but what are some of the barriers to being a female speaker? And be honest with everybody, some of the things that you've run into that people may not actually see. But then what are also some of the benefits of being a female speaker? Obviously, I've told several female entrepreneurs who I know, I'm like, guess what? I was like, there are more opportunities for you because, you really haven't been showcased yet.
Absolutely. And I would say one of the big barriers, in addition to the sense of making sure that someone isn't just approaching you because you are a female, another barrier is, and especially within the education realm, is the sense that sometimes people really expect you to come into a keynote and not, I guess, compensate you for your time. And I get a lot of requests for that. That being said, I think that when you're just getting into the business, it's great to really build your reputation by giving free talks and giving back to the community. But when that's your job, that's your livelihood. You've got to be careful about that, because it could become something to where you're not valued. You're just giving away your time. And it's also not fair to other speakers if you're giving free talks, because it's creating this sense that, oh, well, we can just go find a free speaker. And This is people who do this for a livelihood. So I've had to actually remind myself, it's not just a matter of being nice. These people are getting paid to organize the event, and they have people who are paying to attend their event. In most cases, there is a budget there. So I think that's important to remember that and to be strong about it. I guess the pros would be that sense that within education, there aren't a lot of female speakers, especially in career and technical education or STEM. So it really does create a niche to be able to be that expert and to be that go-to person that people can come to book a female speaker for their gig.
Yeah. Now, I know you're pretty modest about yourself, but I know that you left education, and then the next thing you know, I'm looking for conferences and conventions, and as I start to look at them, I start seeing your face on all these rosters that you're going around. So you left education. The next thing you know, you're working for Google, and the next thing you know, you're traveling all around the country. So from the perspective of being this professional speaker and a perspective of booking speakers, for people watching or listening to this, what are just some words of advice you have for them? Like, one is, how do you approach the person who's going to book? What did you like when speakers approach? But then what are you doing now to get these stages around the country?
I think that the relationships that you build are the most important piece. Between the relationships that I built in the education community, always looking for ways to connect other people, that usually comes back and translates into people being interested in your work and wanting you to speak at their events. I don't do a lot of promotion. Most of it's word of mouth, or I'm speaking at an event already and someone will come up and ask me about speaking at their event. Because I do so much writing and other side projects, I don't invest a lot into going out and promoting myself as a speaker. That being said, I think that your social media presence, which you do an incredible job of, Frank, with your Instagram and Facebook accounts, but really creating a presence there and on Twitter and LinkedIn, those are places where you're establishing your reputation. People are going there when they hear about you to see who you are, linking that to your website, having a website. I think that online presence is huge, because you'll have people call you who they've just heard about you from someone else who heard you speak. they haven't actually seen you speak, but they look to see who you are online, and that really represents who you are. Also, I think that in addition to that, to the relationships and connecting other people, if you speak in an event and you know that they're looking for a keynote the next year, find ways to connect those people to people you know, because they're not going to most likely book you 2 years in a row. But you can really create this ecosystem of speakers who are building each other up and connecting each other. You mentioned, what did I look for when I was booking speakers, when I conferences, which I still do, because I'm on several boards where I'm not going to be the keynote speaker when I'm on serving on the board. But I look for, is it someone who's representing the audience? So looking at who the makeup of the audience is. What is their expertise? So if it's a leadership conference where we have superintendents and principals who talks about leadership, who has a leadership role, and they're able to really speak to and be an expert in that area. If it's a CTE conference, trying to find someone either from a business and industry that we represent in CTE, or someone who has been in that CTE realm is helpful. But also the charisma, like someone who can really own the stage, because you might be an expert in an area, but if you get on stage and you're just spouting out information, or you have a PowerPoint that's just words, people are going to connect to that. And I have to go back to you, Frank, because you're one of the first keynotes that I hired. And I saw you when I was still in the classroom teaching, and it was at an FCCLA conference, and you were with another gentleman talking about bad apples, and the kids loved it. I was able to see your charisma before actually hiring you when I was at the Department of Ed. So I think that getting yourself out there so that people can see you, because most people aren't just going to hire you based upon receiving an email or an ask, hey, can I keynote your event? But if they've seen you speak, or know someone who's seen you speak, that's huge. Or if you can see the video clip of one of your presentations, those videos, and doing what you do and what we're doing right now, of having people be able to see those interactions.
Yeah. Speaking of that video piece, and going back to this booking part, for you, from the booker's eye and perspective, what did you look for in a video? Because I know there's a lot of these people who have videos, and I'll talk to speakers and coach speakers, and I tell them they put together, quote, the sizzle reel, or it looks like a movie trailer. But I know many people like yourself say, you know what, I don't want the movie trailer. So I'm like, what do you look for?
I look for someone who you can see the interactions with the audience. You could hear the audience's response. They seem comfortable on the stage. It could be that they still make a couple of mistakes. That makes us human. We might be professional speakers, but those mistakes sometimes can add character to the presentation itself and show that it's not something that's too stiff or too poised. But I look for someone who also seems very genuine and very passionate, and that the audience is going to be able to connect to what they're saying and what they're doing.
Yeah. Now, like you said, the video, and like you're talking about the social media. So all this is starting to talk about more like a branding and a look. And, I don't know how many compliments you get from it, but I know when I started watching you speak, I went in and I was almost, I don't know how to describe it, but I was just like, I felt, quote, less than, because, and here's why I say less than. Like I said, I have to watch how I phrase this, but from, and we'll talk about slides too, but from your slides, the way you put your social media, but then the way you present and carry yourself at a conference. I know you do a lot of professional associate education, but you are always, I'm like, you look like a CEO when you walk in the room. And there's been points I've shown up, I'm like, I was like, I feel kind of like a bum compared to Rachel. Like, is this something that you actively choose to pick? We're saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to come in here, and when I tell everybody watching, listen to this, when I say $1 million, it's not, quote, $1 million as far as like, hey, I'm trying to be the best looking person. But I mean, you've got this very professional look where when you walk into the room and watch people, like you have like a little bit of a standard. I know you're a little bit taller than people too, but you stick out from the crowd, but in a good way.
Well, I think that if you feel good and you feel like you look good, you feel presentable, it's going to change how you feel on the stage. There was a situation that happened where I got to an event right in time to speak, but my alarm, where I was charging my phone for my alarm clock, the outlet wasn't working. So I wake up and it's light in the room, and I literally just had to throw clothes on and get there. And, if you don't feel good, it's going to affect your performance. I don't know if other people noticed or realized or saw that I had a little bit of bedhead or what, but I think that it's important to take a little bit of extra time and to to make sure that you feel presentable and that you feel like you can talk to anyone in that room and feel respectable. I think that it just changes how you feel and your appearance and your stature as a speaker.
Yep. Yeah. I love talking to people, and I say, hey, essentially as a speaker, performer, it's almost like your superhero uniform or costume. You have to have a set of items that just make you feel your best. So for people watching this, because I know some people are like, I'm just going to jump on stage. I've seen these big time speakers and they can show up in a t-shirt and jeans. And I'm like, well, they have like a certain, they're already known, so they can kind of go jump up there. But for people like us, and that's, as I said, I watched you and I stepped my game up because, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go try to be the best dressed person in the room, because it's not a bad comment here. It's like, wow, it's like, you're always one of the best dressed speakers who come to our conference. I don't think that's a bad thing at all, versus you look like a bum. But, for everybody here, like, what is your superhero? Is it like a certain type of clothing? Is it a certain color? Like, what do you do to feel your best?
I usually try to wear neutrals. Be careful with that though. If you're wearing all black and there's a black background, which is pretty common at an event, you can look like a floating head. But trying to find some neutral clothes that look nice, but that it's not drawing all the attention to your clothes. So I don't do patterns. I don't do bright colors. I just find something that I feel looks classy. I usually like to have a pair of nice shoes, because I think that's, you mentioned being tall. I used to always wear flats, and then I decided, no, I'm just going to embrace being tall. I like heels. So that's what I'm going to go with. So finding what you feel comfortable with and what works for you is really important. I think that, I was going to recommend to you, Frank, that maybe you should spend a little bit more time on your hair when you're speaking.
I'm working on it.
For some of us, that's an important piece on a day-to-day basis. Like today, I don't do much with my hair, but when I'm speaking at an event, I'm going to take a little bit of extra time. And usually when I'm getting ready, I'm listening to, I usually find a TED Talk that I find humorous. If I listen to something funny, it just puts me in good spirits for the day. It puts me in the right mood and the right mode. So while I'm getting ready, I'm also listening to other speakers. I'm thinking through my talk and how I'm going to connect with the audience. What is it? What's the gift that I'm giving to that audience that is so important, that's more important than the nervousness that I feel? So it kind of turns into almost like a ritual in the morning.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, you're talking about that before you get on stage, and I always will have people who ask me, it's like, hey, Frank, what's the worst time for you to get nervous? And I tell people the 5 minutes before you step on stage is the worst for me, because we can't go anywhere. Usually you can walk around and go and do stuff, but now that last 5 minutes, you're just waiting to go up, and it's like it's this weird gray area, because you want to get out on stage but you can't. So for you, you're kind of talking about the TED Talks piece, which I love that. The 5 minutes before you step on stage and grab the mic, you're talking about sharing gifts right now, so I want the gift of knowledge. What do you do to get yourself primed? Because you just made the comment, you said, hey Frank, I'm nervous, and I know most people will probably look at you like, she's nervous. But what do you do to calm those nerves and just get yourself focused before you go out there and either hold onto the mic? I don't know if you do a wireless mic, you can talk about that, but what do you do in that last 5 minutes before you step on stage?
And I'm glad you mentioned that 5 minutes, because it really is, as you're sitting there, sometimes you're looking around at the audience and thinking, wow, this is a lot of people. What am I doing here? And I've learned how to, when I first started speaking, I would feel my knees shaking, I would feel my body just shaking, and it was just overwhelming. But if you can channel that nervous energy into excitement about what you're going to give this audience, looking at how they feel, what the mood, what the tone is before you get on stage, and hoping that they are just pumped up at the end of it and ready to go and make a difference and really impact the lives of students, because most of my audiences are educators. I think that just channeling it into excitement, remembering, hey, you know what? I'm supposed to feel nervous. This makes me human. How can I turn that into excitement and just remember why I'm here? I'll usually focus on my breathing, take a couple of drinks of water. And it's interesting, when I get up on stage, it feels like it goes away. And I know that too. I'd have to remind myself that as soon as I walk on stage, as soon as I start talking, it's gone. I'm there to impart knowledge, to give a performance, and to connect with the audience. And just kind of thinking through that mentally prepares me for my talk.
Nice. Now, once you step out on stage and you're centered and you're owning the room, I know there's speakers who go two different directions. We've got our slide speakers, and we have speakers who don't use slides. And I know your most popular talk is called, Teach Like TED. So, So you're telling people like pretty much how to engage and incorporate that, crowd, like, a TED Talk speaker. So for you, one is, how do you engage with your audience to make sure they're focused to you? So share some advice on how to make that audience focused on you. But then two is, are you a slide speaker or are you not a slide speaker?
I am definitely a slide speaker. There have been times when I had to go without the slides, and that's important to always know your message so well that you're not dependent on the slides. If technology fails, keep going. You know your talk, keep going, and forget about it. Don't let it bother you. But I do prefer to have slides and to use it as a visual backdrop. My 45-minute keynote has around 100 slides. One version of it has 120 slides.
Oh.
And it's visuals. It's something that's just a backdrop that's there, that's connecting, because according to brain research, when someone has an image to connect your words to, it makes it more memorable. If you don't have those images in the background, then you've got to just really use your words to create that rich image within their mind. So they're still seeing it. They're still feeling what you're talking about. But for the slides too, it really helps. For me, it's almost like my speaker notes, because I'm able to remember as I'm not looking at my slides, which is something that you taught my students, and I picked up a tip from, is kind of you're walking and glancing at your slides as you go. But it's something that just helps to keep me on track, and in a sense, it's my cheat sheet, but it's through visual. And I have people ask, they're just like, how do you memorize that entire talk? You don't use notes when you're speaking. For me, as soon as I glance over and that image is there, I keep going. It helps me with my flow.
Yeah. And I love how you said that, people always will ask the same thing to me. It's like, do you memorize? And I told people, it's like, as a speaker, you got to speak about what you're passionate on and what you're knowledgeable on. That way you can just always talk about it, whether it's a short period or a long period. So obviously for you, I'm like, do you write your speech first, then build your slides, or together? But, obviously there's a whole flow to your piece. If you can explain, some of your ideas of how you write and put this together, but then how you, quote, don't memorize, but you look like you have it memorized.
Okay. So I never write out my talk. I have a pretty good sense of how much time I spend per slide. It's probably around 30 to 45 seconds per slide. Some of them are more like 20 seconds. So I'm able to look at the number of slides and kind of gauge how long the talk is going to be. And I also can monitor and adjust as I go. It's something that you learn quickly in education that transfers over into the speaking world. But I'm developing my slides at the same time as I'm working through my material. And I keep a Wakelet collection. Wakelet's a platform that's similar to Pinterest, but you're able to add resources. So as I run across things that I want to add into a future talk, or even create a new talk, I'll add in those resources in there. So, and I make sure that I'm referencing. So if I'm sharing a quote that's from the Institute for the Future, for my the Future of Work talk, or if it's something from Dell Technologies, I'm making sure that I'm referencing those different organizations, because it's giving credibility to what you're saying. If you're talking about the future and it's, hey, no, I can't see into the future, but here are some folks who did a really good job creating algorithms and making these predictions. So I think it's important too to reference other people, especially if you're using their work. But yeah, it really is kind of a combination of creating the slides and developing the talk at the same time. And I tap into I customize each talk for my audience. I always find out who they are, what they're about. If there's a theme to their conference, how can I incorporate that? So each time it's a new slide deck, but I'm tapping into the resources from my previous slide decks to create this new slide deck. So it's not starting from scratch. It's thinking through what can I connect? What are some new pieces I need to add in?
So essentially your title is the same, but the program is adjusted to fit your audience. So you're not given a canned speech every time.
Yes, exactly. So if I'm doing a Teach Like TED talk, there's 10 commandments, but sometimes those even change. Or it may be that it's a shorter talk and they want me to spend more time on storytelling. So I've adjusted it in that sense. But I always make sure that I connect with the planners and ask what the needs of the audience are, and make sure that I'm connecting with that specific audience.
Now, I've seen you speak on this and you've shared with me, but you're talking about slides here. We're going to get technical. But you're talking about, hey, you put your decks together and you gave, a website. There's a lot of people out there who will go and steal not say steal, but we'll talk about that as well, but they'll put quotes in, but you said they don't say where that quote came from, or they'll start to put videos and pictures in that they found off the internet. What is, the proper protocol, because you're an educator, so where it's not considered, you know, plagiarism or theft. Like, so how do we have to follow this as a speaker?
Okay, there's a phrase in education called steal, borrow, and beg, and I may be in the wrong order with that. It's something I disagree with completely. I think that it's important to give credit where credit's due, and I think it makes you more credible as a speaker when you're giving credit to that person. Or if there's a video clip that you're using and it's from a news station and from a TED Talk, it's going to say where it's from. It's not your own video. For my slides, I usually use, I have a website called Envato. I used to use Unsplash and Pixabay to get free images from the web that don't have to have the credits at the bottom. But I've started using Envato. It's because it has short little video clips that can kind of draw your audience into your intro slide or closing slide. And it's something that I'm going to say it's like $150 a year. I could be off on that, but it's totally worth it because you have so many resources. It's unlimited resources that you're using to create your slides. But I also try to use my own images too, like having pictures that have my nieces or nephews, or, you know, something personal. For my the Future of Work talk, I was in DC a couple of months ago, and I saw this ice house. Like, it was an old historical ice house where people would go and get their ice. And I'm like, I've got to use this to show that, yeah, there's careers that go away. We don't have ice houses anymore, but there are new careers that are coming along all the time. So I had to take a picture of that and add that to be a part of my keynote.
Yeah. So how do you spell Envato?
Envato. Envato, and they have different branches. I use, and they're all great, but the one that I like the most is Envato Elements. And that's just where I get my resources, just so that's something that people haven't seen before, because some of I'll see I have an Unsplash video or an Unsplash picture that I got for free, but then I'll see it everywhere else. So I just want to have something that's a little bit unique.
Yeah. So we got envato.com. So obviously I've got people who are professionals listening to this, and they can make that investment. But for people like when you first started out, I've seen you use some other software. For people who can't necessarily make that investment, but they still want to have some unique photos, is there maybe a free or low cost resource for them?
Yes, definitely check out Unsplash. It has millions of images that are all free. You don't have to credit the artist, the photographer, and you can do anything with those pictures. It literally says on the website that the only thing that you cannot do with those images is create another platform that is using their pictures that does the exact same thing, where people are downloading images. So you can cut them up, make collages, whatever. And then Pixabay. Pixabay is another really good one. Some organizations like Death to Stock Photo, they have really realistic looking photos, and they'll send you teasers. So they'll send you like a set of 8 pictures each month. And I'll download those. It may not be something I'm going to use right away, but I might be able to use them eventually. Their hope is that you'll buy a subscription, but I already have a subscription elsewhere. But, you know, sometimes even just starting to collect some of those images that you think you might use someday, keeping a folder set aside for that so that you have those resources to go to.
Nice. So obviously we're offering some advice here, and that's the big reason why we do this here, Fresh Takes. So obviously there's the art of speaking and the business of speaking. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions one at a time. For anyone watching this who wants to improve or elevate their abilities at the art of speaking, which is just the ability to talk to an audience, you know, what's one piece of advice if someone came to you right now that you would share on how they can get better on stage or speaking in public?
Say yes to every opportunity. As sometimes people think that they have to be a completely polished speaker before they get up on stage. You're never going to get better unless you put yourself out there and get on stage. Find opportunities to talk, whether it's going to a improv and you know, trying your hand at improv, or going to what are those morning meetings? I just forgot the name of it.
Toastmasters.
Toastmasters, yes. I went to one of those. I decided it wasn't right for me when I realized that they count how many times people say
Yeah.
No, but it's a great platform. My stepdad goes there every week and loves it. And you know, finding those opportunities to speak, and then also you know, just being willing to sometimes invest in your skill. Like Frank, I mentioned earlier that you came and did trainings with the high school students. And that was something that, you know, hiring someone to even coach you individually, that can be beneficial, or finding a trusted friend. Like there are people that I'll test my ideas out on to see how they interact with them. They don't even realize sometimes that I'm testing it out, but I'm watching their facial expressions, seeing if it's something that I think that they're connecting with and that an audience might connect with. There's a book called Weekend Conversations that talks some about that too. Just making your talks, your keynotes conversational so that it's not it's not stiff. You want to make sure you're really connecting with your audience.
We're going to pause for 1 second because I am at the end of the flight line, and I don't know if you can hear it here, and anybody watching or listening to this, but we've got talking about paying attention to what's going on around you. I've got fighter jets flying over me right now, so I pull out all the stops when I bring in my guests, Rachel. So we get the flyover for you. But,
thank you, I appreciate that.
but yeah, so that was really great there with that piece there. As you said, just go ahead and speak more. Just be willing to go out there and just try every time. As you said, we can't be perfect, and we will never be perfect on stage, but we constantly work to get better. So once we've gotten better and we really start to fall in love with this, and it's almost like a legal high. I'm sure you can probably admit, once you get on stage and people love the information, they can go and apply it. Then maybe there's a point, and especially I've got a lot of educators who listen to this and are part of the group, and you're an educator. What's a business piece of advice you have for someone who wants to maybe become a professional speaker or get compensated for this ability?
You start getting testimonials. So you may be doing some free talks here and there on different platforms. Start getting testimonials from the people who've heard you speak, because I think that is going to help to build your that reputation piece again is huge. And then also speak at conferences, put in proposals to speak at conferences. As I mentioned before, one of my first keynotes I had put in to do a breakout session. They contacted me and said, hey, I think we would like this to be the keynote instead. So sometimes that can lead somewhere else, but it's also building up your calendar. Mm-hmm. And then have something ready to give out to the audience, whether it's your business card and saying, here is a link to free resources connected to this presentation, but include in that link to the free resources that if you would like to bring Rachael Mann to your school or to your organization, here's how to contact me, because you've just given them something that they're going to tap into because they want those resources. But it's also an opportunity for you to have almost a business card that's online connected to those resources.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I'd be remiss for not saying this because you brought it up a couple of times. So like I said, the idea of this is to educate people. You brought up the term throughout this. You've said keynote, you said workshops, you said breakout session, you said training. What's the difference in your terms? Like, I know how I feel about it, but what's the difference in those areas? Because many times people will say, I'm not ready to be a keynote speaker, but there are other opportunities for them to speak and even be compensated.
Oh, absolutely. So as a trainer, it could be that you're doing half-day workshops or full-day workshops or multiple-day trainings based on your area of expertise. So I usually use the word training in that sense, that it's something that's longer than just an hour or two. Sessions would be something that's usually a part of a larger event. So it's something to where they have multiple speakers and people have choices of where to go for different sessions, so breakout sessions. Workshops usually involves a hands-on piece where they're actually either processing ideas and doing something with it or doing something hands-on. When I'm doing technology trainings, I refer to those as workshops because everyone has their devices, they're getting to explore, they're getting to create. And then a keynote is when you're on the main stage. You're the person that everyone who's attending that conference gets to hear from. So that's going to be your keynote.
So then as you're saying, because I know you do take care of a lot of conferences, so when people start to go, they may not be ready for the keynote, but look for something, whether it be on the conference's webpage, but it'll say, submit a training, submit a workshop, so they can actually get some experience right there, but also leverage, as you said, the testimonial piece of like, hey, I spoke at this conference, and that helps get more opportunities too.
Absolutely. And again, those conferences are opportunities to get clients. There are some conferences that I speak at, and as a board member, I'm not getting paid to speak at it. That's just part of what I do as a board member if I'm doing a breakout session or doing an introduction for the keynote. But I'll have people come up afterwards and ask me if I can come to their district, and we'll exchange contact information. And so it's still that calling card, if you will, that you're giving out.
Yep. So speaking of just giving out, you've given out a lot of great information to help people. So I know they're really going to love this episode here. For the people who want to continue this relationship and, just continue to learn from you, where can people find you? Like, where is their email, phone number, social media? How can people stay in touch with you?
Okay, yeah, so my website is rachaelmann.co, and Rachel has two A's. It's RACHAELMANN.co. And then I am on social media for LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. It's at Rachael Edu, so at RACHAEL EDU. And feel free to text or call me. My phone number is 520-370-4914. But would love to stay connected and to keep the conversation going.
Perfect. So just make sure that people know you spell Rachel the correct way. So 2 A's.
Yeah.
And then we're looking you up for Mann. We have to make sure we put 2 N's in there. So for anybody who searches for it, it's Rachael 2 A's and Mann MANN. So
Yes.
Rachel, it has been great to have you on here. I'm gonna let my flyby go over. So see, I got the flyover to go off. Hold on for 1 second. We got those going. But what's just one line, one phrase, whatever you want to do. What do you want to leave people here with? What's the one, if you're gonna call it? Everybody who wants to become a speaker, there's always a call to action, which means you can make people feel really good, when you're listening to you and going, but if you don't give them a call to action when they leave, then you didn't do a great job as a speaker. So Rachel, what is your call to action for everybody listening to this?
All right. I would say think bigger. Don't limit yourself. I think that sometimes we're our own worst enemy and we limit our ability and our potential. Think bigger, believe in the message that you have, and then prepare for the impact that you're going to have on your audience, on other people. You may not see that impact right away. I've had people come back to me a year later and say, hey, remember that talk that you gave? This is how it changed my workplace. I had a dentist, one of my first times doing a Teach Like TED presentation. I had a dentist come back to me a year later. He was a board member who happened to be in my session. And he said that that talk transformed the entire culture of his office. And that was mind-blowing. So you may have people come back and tell you the impact, you may not, but just know that you're making a difference and it's a message that people need to hear.
Yep. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That's Miss Rachael Mann, author, professional speaker, entrepreneur, soon-to-be podcaster, is telling everybody here, go ahead and think bigger. And if you want to keep thinking bigger, make sure you stay in touch with Miss Rachael Mann. Rachel, thank you so much. It's been great having you on here, and you and I will connect soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Frank.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.